Welcome to the Fearless Revolution. Courage is important, but taking fearful action is not a sustainable long-term strategy. If you want to take back control of your life and stop believing the lies that are holding you back, then you're in the right place. Join Sandy Gledhill, your fearless leader coach, as she reveals the secrets to living and leading fearlessly. Now, let's join the Fearless Revolution.
Hello and welcome back to the Fearless Revolution. My name is Sandy Gledhill and I am your host and your tour guide on this epic journey to becoming fearless. Today, I want to talk about identity. I love the topic of identity, but that word has become kind of a buzzword lately. And I'm not opposed to buzzwords. Buzzwords are basically just topics where the pendulum has swung a little and people have realized the importance of that topic. And so everybody starts talking about it and then it becomes a buzzword. That's okay with me. I like that. I like bringing important subjects to the surface so that lots of different leaders are talking about it. What I'm opposed to is when people begin to create cookie cutter solutions or people offer solutions that are really band-aids over gaping wounds. And I think this particular topic of identity falls into that category. So I do a lot of identity work when I do my Fearless Leader coaching. And I am a big believer that your true identity is placed inside of you before you're even born. I believe that we are each born with the fullness of our identity, which is whatever it is that makes you unique and special. It's your superpower. It's those personality traits that just come naturally to you. If you have children of your own, you know what I'm talking about. They're born with their identity, sometimes from just the earliest days and weeks of life, you start to see that identity coming out of them. That means we're born with the fullness of what makes us unique and special. Well, if that's the case, why is everybody running around so uncertain and unclear about who they are? Well, I've got some ideas about that. And as you might guess, fear is a culprit in all of this. I think when we're young, the expectations of others and the words of others begin to shape us pretty radically. So we see it a lot, especially in young kids, where they begin to modify, adjust, change the very core of who they are to fit in with a peer group. So we call this peer pressure, and we talk about it as if it's a childhood problem. But I'm here to tell you, peer pressure is alive and well in the adult world. I see it in the corporate realm. I see it in churches, in community groups. Like, it's a thing. Human beings want to fit in. We don't want to disappoint. We don't want to look stupid. So we tend to start twisting ourselves into pretzel shapes to keep people around us happy. It becomes very unhealthy when we're trying to meet expectations of people who really shouldn't have a voice in our lives. I'm not saying that we shouldn't, I believe iron sharpens iron. I have some friends that sharpen me. We don't see things the same. We aren't lined up politically. We have different religious beliefs. And I love that. I love the conversations, not the debates, but the conversations of really listening to each other. And I know that I've changed a lot of firmly held positions just when my own daughter became an adult and we started having really thoughtful conversations. All of that's good. But your core identity, that who you are, that spiritual side of yourself that you're born with, that can become corrupted. I am releasing my book called The Fearless Revolution. Probably end of January, beginning of February, that'll be coming out. And I have a chapter in there where I do a really deep dive on identity. And I want to just touch on that today, speaking to you about it because it's such an important and foundational topic. Before we blaze out and try to live fearlessly, it's important to know who you are. It's important for me to know who I am. So, for instance, in my life, when I was a young adult, people said to me, "You're a salesman. Sandy, you should be in sales." And it was true that I had some sales ability. As part of my personality, I can be persuasive and I can also show the value in something and help somebody make a buying decision. That just happens to be a skill. But my identity is really that of coach. I have the heart of a coach. And for a long time, I allowed people's words and their expectations of me to define who I am. Why did I do that? Well, I had and still have a great tendency toward being a people pleaser. I say I'm a reformed people pleaser because I'm aware of it now and I've really changed my habits in that arena, but that didn't happen until I was able to rediscover my true identity. So think about this. If I showed you a photograph of a group of people and I pointed to somebody in that picture and said, "Look at you in this picture." If you looked and that wasn't you, you would be like, "That's not me." But if I looked at the picture and looked at your face and insisted, "No, that's definitely you," what would you do? You would probably take a closer look. You'd probably scrutinize that picture. And then you would say with a little bit more force, "That's not me." Why? Because we know with unimpeachable precision who we are on the outside. We would never cop to being called somebody else in a photograph. But I submit to you that we allow people to call us out and define us on the inside really frequently. And we do it without making correction to them. So when people said to me, "Sandy, you are this," I didn't stand up and say, "No, I'm not that. I can see maybe why you think that, but really what I am is." And the reason I didn't do that is I had not done the intentional, important work of really rediscovering what my God given identity is, who I was designed and created to be. And because I had not done that, I couldn't really speak with authority when somebody looked at me and said, "You are this." So I think our true identities, they get buried. They get buried under lies and debris and other people's opinions and other people's definitions of who we are. And unless we go through the work, and this is a lot of what I do in my coaching, is I have a 6-week coaching process that brings people through this to do this identity work. You got to kind of pull that debris off one thing at a time. There are important questions that we need to ask ourselves when we are trying to rediscover our true identity. And the questions are not super complex. They're not complicated. They're actually very simple questions, but it is just amazing to me that as important as this topic is, as important and foundational as knowing who you are on the inside, as important as that is, we put very little intentional work and effort into this particular practice of asking ourselves the right questions, of determining who we are. So, there are actually some pretty great ways to find your identity. So I'm not going to go through all the questions with you here today that I go through in my coaching, but I do want to give you an overview of where I often help people to find their identity. This is actually a really fun practice. I love doing it. And there's always a moment where I'm talking to somebody and it just hits for them. Like we hit on the right language and it resonates so profoundly. You can just see it in their eyes and hear it in their voice. How do we do that? Well, I have found one super secret way to find at least part of your true identity. It lives in the cross section between a superpower that you have that oozes out or rises to the surface unbidden, something you almost can't help. And it lives between the cross section of that superpower and the thing in you that has most likely been dishonored, teased, mocked, or discredited. So let me give you some examples. So part of my identity, I'm going to share with you, I think I've shared in previous episodes, but I want to share with you right now. Part of my identity is I'm a treasure hunter and I'm a mouthpiece. Those happen to be two really important parts of my identity. The mouthpiece part is my superpower. So here's a question I always ask when I'm doing identity coaching with a client. Give me a time when you felt really powerful. You felt like you were showing up powerfully, either in your words or in deeds, and you helped somebody. You impacted somebody's life, or you impacted the world and made it better. What is that moment of power? What springs to your mind? Well, if I answer that question, it's almost always has to do with coaching somebody, problem solving in somebody's life, helping them break through and achieve a goal, rediscover a dream, or just accomplish something, figure out who they are. That's always my superpower. It has to do with using my voice and problem solving in somebody's life. Now, if you ask me, what is the one quality in your life that has most often been mocked, teased, dishonored, or discredited? It is also my voice. It is every single solitary year of school where I came home with a report card that said, Sandy's a great student, but she talks too much. It is being the butt of jokes in the family because I'm the one that's putting myself out there and being extroverted and talking. It is being told that my voice was too loud. Once I was told my voice cuts through steel. I have had just about everything possible said about my voice. And this is how I knew Tim was the one that was supposed to be my husband. One of the first things he ever said to me was, I just love your voice. And he's been telling me that for 15 years. And I'm like, God bless you, honey. You are definitely my soulmate. But do you see how an important part of my true identity lived in that cross section between what makes me powerful, my superpower, and that thing that has also been discredited, derided, and dishonored often in my life? And sometimes that discrediting or that mocking comes from people who love you. When you have a strong part of your identity, especially when you're a kid and that thing, you're immature and that thing leads your decisions and it leads your behaviors, it becomes an easy target for family members to make fun of. I don't think that it has to be malicious to still be hurtful. And I also think the tendency can be for you to take that teasing or that dishonoring and cause it to make you want to twist yourself into a pretzel shape to make other people happy. So I know that happened a lot in my life. I call that identity corruption. So in my book, I talk about identity rediscovery, rediscovering, taking the debris off and unburying who you were created to be. Putting great language around that. When I got the language of treasure hunter and mouthpiece, it was like the sun came out and I just felt like, yes, that's exactly who I am. But I came to that through a long series of a long quest, really. My quest to becoming fearless, to understanding that fearlessness is even possible. It was kind of a long, arduous road for me because I didn't have a coach. I didn't have somebody who went before me to say, let me shorten your learning curve, which is what I'm doing now for the world. It's what I'm doing for you to say, here's what I've learned, avoid these pitfalls, short circuit that thing over there, and just land here. This is where the magic lives. So if you couldn't answer the question really quickly and easily, what is your identity? Then this is something you want to think of. What lives in that cross section between your superpower and that thing that's probably been dishonored or maybe even mocked your whole life? Okay. Once you figure out what that is, now you want to give it language. So for me, I went on this long quest, and through really just years of trial and error, I found which questions were helpful to ask myself, which ones were valuable and moved me forward in my quest, versus the questions that were not helpful, or worse yet, questions that were destructive. We ask ourselves a lot of questions all the time, and a lot of them are destructive. Why do I talk so much? Why can't I control myself when I'm at a party? Why can't, those were destructive questions. They didn't help me. When I found the right questions to ask myself, then I began to really dig in. And one question that I ultimately landed on was, what is my purpose here in this world? Why do I believe I was created? And I actually asked that question with a bit of desperation at the time that I asked it. And when I did, it was like something dropped into my spirit. It came unbidden. It did not come from my head. It wasn't a cognitive thought that I gave a bunch of contemplation to. It was like an answer from heaven. And what I heard was, you're a treasure hunter and you're a mouthpiece. And I just knew it was true. I can't even describe how I knew it was true. I just knew. But I believe if I had not taken the time and been intentional and really in some ways like relentless in my search to discover who I was, I'm not sure I would have gotten to that point of even asking the right question, or having developed a habit, which I have to this day, of taking time every morning to do some meditation, some prayer, some reflection, and just asking good questions that deserve answers. So this whole identity quest thing is really important. And when you realize who you were created to be, then what I love to do is help clients get some language around that. So for instance, I have this one great client, and we have been working together, and her identity is earnest, enthusiastic advocate. And it so describes her. It took us a long time and a lot of questions and a lot of like plowing through things to get there. But her superpower is this advocacy, wanting to bring unity, wanting everybody to be heard, and this enthusiasm. But the enthusiasm is also the thing that has often been teased or mocked or, just dishonored in her. And so it was that cross section. But when you realize that the people who have mocked you, the people who have discredited you or tried to, have actually done you a favor because they've left breadcrumbs on this trail for you to come and rediscover who you really are, then you can actually live with gratitude toward them. You can forgive hurt feelings, recognize, especially if they were family, they weren't trying to hurt you. They were just being family, and we've all done it to each other. But really, it can help you on your own quest to determine who you really are. Who were you really created and designed to be? It's probably one of the most worthy endeavors. I used to actually kind of scoff when people said like, "Oh, I'm trying to find myself." And I just thought that was the stupidest thing. But now that I've gone on this journey, I recognize that trying to find yourself is legit. That is a really worthy endeavor, and I highly recommend it. And I actually help a lot of people do it. It's incredibly important. So I will tell you, I have two sets of questions that I have clients walk through when they're trying to rediscover their true identity. The first 10 questions are all about what's wrong with you. Now, normally I'm not a big advocate of let's focus on the negative, but when you're trying to find that cross section, sometimes you have to determine, what have I been criticized about? What is it that I'm what part of me is most misunderstood by people? What am I accused of that I just know isn't true? So for instance, again, in my life, I was often accused of being moody. On some level, I knew I was not moody, but I had this internal struggle between my sort of big extroverted personality and this drive to be a leader, and then all these hidden fears. And so I would kind of go deep and be heavy and sometimes even depressed when I was pressed into the lies of those fears. But then when I was operating in this flow of my superpower and my true identity, I was on top of the world. And it did create this thing that felt a little, mania and depression, mania and depression. And that wasn't who I was. But I could see why people felt like that's who I was. So I had to dig in and ask myself the hard question of, why do people think I'm moody? And why do I act moody? Because for many years of my life, probably all the way through my 30s, that was something that I struggled with. So you have to ask these hard questions. Don't dwell there, but ask the questions, get the answers that are going to help you achieve your purpose of rediscovering your true identity. So these questions that are all about sort of the what's wrong with me, or what do people think is wrong with me? What do I think is wrong with me? I call these like free association. We are so predisposed to focusing on the negative in ourselves. Like, we focus on and remember our mistakes, our missteps, the times we've blown it, failed, fallen short. And then conversely, when we nail it, when we do something awesome, we tend to just dismiss it. This is why any client I've ever worked with will tell you, record your wins, celebrate your wins. I make everybody keep a list, because if you don't write it down and revisit it often, it's like your brain wants to dismiss all the good stuff and hold on to all the negative stuff and remind you about it. That is another function of fear. So fearless leaders, I want my fearless leaders to discard. Learn from your mistakes, but don't hold on to them. Discard them. Like, aggressively discard your failures and your mistakes, and hold on to, write down, visit, and celebrate your wins. That is such an important part of being a fearless leader. So when you're asking yourself questions around, what has been teased? What have I been teased for most of my life? What have I been criticized for? What exhausts me? Those are free association. You're going to come up with things very quickly. Kind of the first thing that hits your mind is what you want to write down. But then when you move into the questions around what's right with you, you definitely want to give these some time. You want to think about them and go deep, because I call these pondering questions, because your brain isn't going to quickly grab evidence about your awesomeness. That is like mining for gold. It's worth it, but you have to put more effort into that. It won't rise right to the top, generally speaking. So the pondering questions are things about what makes you special. What's your superpower? What are you doing when you feel the most powerful? How do your children think you serve them best? If you were a gift to the world, how would you describe yourself? If you thought of yourself as a gift to the world, what would you call yourself? What would be the name of you, the gift to the world? These are ways that you help yourself rediscover your true identity. So it is a really fun exercise. It's a worthy exercise. And once you figure it out, it becomes a life skill. I still do this. I think there's no end to our identities. I think there's so much richness, so much height and depth and so many facets and layers to who you are that you could do this for your entire lifetime and still be discovering new and exciting aspects to your identity. But I would say that you need to check and make sure that you at least first identify some of those core things about who you are. I don't know about you, but I didn't know really much at all about who I was. Not only was I not dialed in to my true identity, but I had allowed my identity to be corrupted over the years by expectations of others and opinions of others and hiding parts of myself I didn't deem to be acceptable or as good as, by playing the comparison game, which is so destructive and leads to like envy and jealousy. Let all that go and make a decision that you are going to treasure hunt your own identity. And then I invite you to unveil your true self, who you really are, to the world. Because the world needs your gifts, the world needs your talents, the world needs your uniqueness and your quirkiness and your weirdness and that thing that just makes you so special. The world needs you to be funny in the way that only you can be funny, and compassionate in a way that's deep and natural to you. The world needs who you are. And when you pursue fearlessness, you pursue who you were born to be, and then you bravely uncover that and show it to the world. We're not talking about taking steps while we're afraid, right? We love courage. I'm a huge fan of courage, but courage is taking fearful action. It's time to start living fearlessly, just moving beyond courage, rediscovering your true identity, and then just saying, look out, world, this is who I am, and I'm coming for you. Thank you so much for being with me today on the Fearless Revolution. I am Sandy Gledhill, and I'd just like to remind you, I am imperfect. I'm in process, and yet I'm fully living in my purpose, because you are allowed to be all those things at once. God bless you. Have a great day.
The Fearless Revolution has begun, and you are an important part of getting the message of fearlessness out to the world. Follow Sandy on Facebook and Instagram at The Fearless Revolution for more empowering content that will help leaders embrace the fullness of their identities, lean into their destinies, and lead fearlessly. Check out the show notes for all the links. If this podcast has impacted you, we ask that you subscribe or follow, and be sure to share with another fearless leader.